Hi, it's me again, Erik the Linguist. Welcome back. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you 4 main sentence structures for expressing modality effectively. And if you go to the description below, you can find the corresponding blog post that will be basically the similar ideas about this topic. Before we move on, it would be nice that we remember the basic principles of using modality in your writing, such as the basic use of modal verbs in order to express your modality. You can check our previous video in order to find out more. And also, we may also use semi-modals in order to adjust your tone, just like the modal verbs. And I've also included the link for the previous tutorial for you here as well. And as we progress in our schooling as well as in our experience in writing our essays, we find that modality can actually be replaced by different parts of speech but refer to the same degree of modality. For example, apart from using modal verbs, you can also use verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and nouns. So basically, you are paraphrasing modal verbs with different grammatical items. And you will find these grammatical structures or the sentence structures particularly useful for your academic writing for expressing such as a possibility, obligation, necessity, the 3 main types of modality that you'll come across during writing your essays. So the following 4 types of sentence structures will be useful for expressing these 3 types of modality, and they can be reused in these types of modality. So here we go. So structure A, it will be, so we will use adjectives in place of the modal verbs in order to show modality. For example, we can have a sentence structure starting with it and then followed by a linking verb, and then we will have an adjective followed by either to infinitives or that clauses. For example, for possibility, we can have it and then linking verb, and then with the adjectives such as certain, probable, possible, likely, and then followed by to infinitive or that clauses. It is good to illustrate this with an example. So we have Erik must be crazy, or if we can tune down the possibility, we can say Erik should be crazy or Erik may be lazy to show different degrees of possibility. And if we are going to rephrase this whole sentence with adjectives, we can say it is certain that Erik is lazy, or a little bit toning down, we will have it is probable that Erik is crazy, it is possible, it is likely. So all these 4 adjectives would be used to refer to different modal verbs such as must, should, may, or can, depending on whether you want to adjust the possibility into a higher degree or a lower degree. So for obligation, we can replace the adjectives representing the modality of possibility into those representing obligation, such as obligatory, imperative. Okay, so using the same sentence structure with it and then a linking verb, followed by obligatory, imperative, and then followed by to the infinitive and that clauses. For the higher modality, we can say Erik must finish his task, or a little bit lower, Erik should finish his task. So we can replace these modal verbs with imperative or obligatory as adjectives. And say it is imperative for Erik to finish his task, or it is obligatory for Erik to finish his task. So again, we can use the same sentence structure to express the modality for showing necessity. Okay, so we replace the adjectives with necessary, and then we have the same sentence structure, it with linking verb and then necessary, followed by two infinitives or that clauses. So for example, we can say Erik need to pay his bills. So we use need as a modal verb, so we don't need to change its tense into needs. But if we see need as the main verb for the clause, we can say Erik needs to pay his bills. Okay, so we can use necessary to replace the modal verbs and the main verb need. It won't be right to say Erik is necessary for paying his bills, but it would be better if we start the sentence with the dummy subject it by saying it is necessary for Erik to pay his bills, just like the previous example before showing different types of modality. Okay? So far, we have used the same structure for representing three different types of modality: possibility, obligation, and necessity. Okay, so in the next structure, it will be the same. So for the same structure, different types of modality. So here we go. So for structure B, we will use adverbs to replace the modal verbs. So this sentence structure is very simple. We just use the adverb with a clause. So for example, okay, to show possibility, we can use adverbs such as certainly, probably, possibly, likely, or perhaps within a clause in order to show different degrees of possibility. Of course, you can use other adverbs not in this list, such as definitely and of course. Okay, so in the next example, we're going to use the example that we used for structure A. So here we go. So we can say Erik is certainly crazy, or Erik is probably crazy, possibly crazy, or perhaps crazy. I'm sure you notice that these adverbs can be put at the beginning of a sentence, okay, such as certainly, followed by a comma. Erik is crazy, probably, possibly, perhaps, or even of course, comma, Erik is lazy or crazy. Of course, sometimes I'm lazy, but basically you have an idea. In more spoken-like situations, we can use adverbs to start a sentence in order to show somehow your attitude towards the argument about, let's say, Erik is crazy. Am I not? So for obligations, I would say it is not very common for us to use obligatorily or imperatively inside a clause to show the modality of obligation. But in order to make a case, I'm going to show you anyway. So let's have a look at my example in the following slide. So Erik is to finish his tasks imperatively or obligatorily. This sounds a little bit unnatural as a way to express obligation of somebody with an adverb. Okay, but I just want to make a case that you can do it, but not all the time. Okay, so let's move on. Same would go for modality for necessity. So we can use necessarily inside a clause, but I won't say it sounds very natural in comparison with the modal verb or the main verb need to. Okay, so we have an example. So here we have Erik necessarily pays his bills. Okay, so this doesn't sound very natural, but just to make a case, we can use necessarily in place of the modal verb need or the main verb need to. Okay, so far so good. So in structure C, we are replacing modal verbs with main verbs in order to show the similar idea about adjusting modality in terms of possibility, obligation, and necessity. For example, so if we want to take a speaker's point of view by adjusting the certainty, possibility, obligation, or necessity from our own perspectives, we can use the subject I or we followed by a verb, such as the reporting verbs, and then followed by two infinitives or that clauses. And we can also background our point of view by using the passive form of the reporting verb and then using it as the subject of the sentence. And then after the passive verb, we have that clause. So a slight twist of backgrounding our point of view would be using other nouns or pronouns as subject, followed by the passive verb form of that reporting verb, and then followed by two infinitives. Okay, so again, one by one, I'll start from possibility first, and then I'll move forward to obligation, and then necessity. Okay, so here we go. I'm sure you still remember our original sentence with the modal verb. Erik must be crazy, or Erik should be lazy, or crazy, or Erik can be lazy. So if we want to replace the modal verb with the passive form of the verb, we can say something like this. It is confirmed that Erik is crazy. It is proved that Erik is crazy. If we want to say the modality of this possibility is high, or we can say it is believed that, suggested that, or speculated that if the modality of the possibility is rather low. Similarly, we can use first-person subject pronouns such as I or we with the active form of the verb, such as we confirm that Erik is lazy or crazy, or we prove that Erik is crazy, believe that Erik is crazy. So you can see from confirm to speculate or guess, we have a scale of modality from high possibility or high certainty to a low possibility. Okay? Or we can use Erik as the subject of the sentence by saying Erik is confirmed to be crazy. So the same thing for the same effect. So Erik is proved to be crazy, Erik is believed to be crazy, suggested to be crazy. Same structure with the same use of verbs to mean the same modality of different degrees. Okay, from confirmed to high modality to speculated lower modality. So for obligations, we can use the same sentence structure to refer to the modality of obligation at various degrees, such as it is urged that Erik finishes his task, or it is advised that Erik finishes his task, recommended, or suggested. So again, from the top to the bottom, higher modality to a sort of lower modality. If you want to take a more personal or subjective point of view, you can start the sentence with first-person pronouns such as I or we, followed by the reporting verbs in the active voice, such as I urge that Erik finishes his task, I advise that Erik finishes his task, I recommend, I suggest. So different sentence structure, but with the same reporting verbs, but the same modality in different degrees. Okay? Or again, we can use the passive form of the reporting verbs with other nouns or other pronouns as the subject. Okay, so if we have the original sentence with Erik as a subject, so we can use Erik again as the topic for the sentence. So we have Erik is urged to finish his task, Erik is advised, okay. Erik is recommended, Erik is suggested. In this case, the agency of urging Erik to do something would be background by hiding the doer of these verbal actions. For necessity, it is not very common for us to use the verb form for necessity, necessitate. Okay? In this case, I only want to make it an example that just to show you that you can use this verb, especially in your academic writing, but not a must, okay? Perhaps you could use it just to show that you know this word. So for example, we can say, Erik is necessitated to pay his bills. Okay? So this has the same effect by saying Erik needs to pay his bills or Erik need pay his bills. Same thing. Or if you wish to push it a little further, with the same verb necessitate, you can say something like this. So being the sole breadwinner necessitates Erik's paying all the bills. So we are pushing everything to the extreme. Okay, so being the sole breadwinner would be the first noun phrase as a subject. Okay, so it originally represents one whole sentence. Okay, but now it is compressed into just a noun phrase to become the subject of a simple sentence. Okay, and then we use the active voice of the verb necessitate, and then we have the main argument that is the example that we used earlier on. Okay, and then that example as a sentence is now again compressed into a noun phrase. But what's the effect of it? I'm not going to elaborate further here, but this is an idea that you can refer to, how you can pack more meanings within one sentence, okay, by nominalizing everything from a clause or from a sentence into a noun phrase. Okay? And here we are, we have structure D. And in the previous slide, I just talked about compressing clauses or sentences into a noun phrase. And in this structure, we are also compressing the modality and put it within the noun phrase. Okay, so you see in the following examples, the modality will be hidden or embedded inside noun phrases. Okay, so here we go. For example, we can use a noun phrase and then we complete the sentence with a complement. Okay, so the complement will be used to adjust the degree of modality. For example, for possibility, so we can say the certainty, the probability, possibility, or likelihood of Erik being crazy is high. Okay, so originally the sentence Erik must be crazy is crazily compressed into a noun phrase. So everything before the main verb is would represent the original sentence about Erik being crazy. So you can also see the verb must be has become the gerund being. Okay, so we have embedded the modality inside the noun phrase with the nouns certainty, probability, possibility, and we use the rest of the sentence in order to adjust the degree of that modality. Similarly, for obligation, we can say the obligation of Erik finishing the task on time is high. And then for necessity, we can also say the necessity of Erik paying the bills is high. So in this case, the main verb inside the sentence is would always be singular because necessity, obligation, and possibility will be singular. Okay, so remember this. And of course, if you would like to push it a little further, we may have some extra expressions. So we can switch the position of the noun phrase in a sentence from the beginning of the clause towards the end of the sentence, and then we can use there is to start the sentence. And you may remember the function of there is starting the sentence would be to introduce a thing. And in this case, a thing here would be a noun phrase having the modality. Okay? Remember, originally the modality was expressed in terms of a modal verb in a full sentence. Now it's extremely compressed into a form of a noun phrase. And in academic writing especially, we can use there is to introduce some abstract things, such as, like in this case, modality. Okay, so in the following example, I'll show you this. So for possibility, we can say there is a high probability that Erik is crazy. Okay, remember, originally we have the sentence Erik must be crazy, right? And now it is fully, extremely compact into a long noun phrase. Okay, and the head noun in this noun phrase would be probability, and then we have the adjective modifying it, adjusting the degree of modality. And now the sentence structure there is would be to introduce this whole thing, the high probability that Erik is crazy. So similarly, we can use the same sentence structure to express obligation. So for example, there is a great urgency that Erik is to finish his task on time. Again, this kind of structure sounds quite awkward, but this is possible. Okay, so there is a great urgency. So the head noun will be urgency, and then we adjust the degree of urgency by the adjective great. Okay. So for necessity, we can say there is a high necessity that Erik is to pay all the bills. I'm not going to repeat the explanation of what it does, what the sentence structure does, but the basic idea is the same sentence structure with the same grammatical structure, the noun phrase, with the there is, we can show modality of different types. So it would be good that we do a quick summary of the four structures that I've just introduced. And you might notice that we can recycle all these four types of sentence structures in order to express different types of modality. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you a summary of these four structures. So you can see, for each structure, we can use a different parts of speech in order to replace the modal verb for, let's say, for more variety. Okay, so structure A, we are using adjectives representing modality, and structure B, we are using adverbs. In C, we are using verbs, especially the reporting verbs and thinking verbs. Okay, and structure D, we will pack everything inside the noun phrase. Okay, the noun phrase including modality. So if you're interested in the text version of this tutorial, you can go to my Wordpress, my blog post, corresponding to this video tutorial. After this tutorial, you may wonder, are there any subtle differences among these expressions? Okay. So what is the motivation behind using different parts of speech to mean the same modality? And I'm sure what we're interested in knowing would be, in academic writing, which structures would be more commonly used to express modality, and why some are preferred while some are not. So let's explore these questions further in our next tutorial. But just a little teaser for you. Okay, the answer is yes, of course. Different expressions show how much we display ourselves or conceal ourselves from the text, and we can make use of some of these expressions to sound more formal and distant in academic writing. Okay, so how are we doing it? We'll examine or we'll explore more of these expressions in detail in the next tutorial. Okay, so that's all from me. Okay, thanks for watching. Ta-ra!